Hello, everyone, and welcome to KeyNote Expert Voices, the podcast of KeyNote women speakers. We have a series of podcasts for you. Episode number 1 was about emotional resilience. Episode number 2 was about diversity in the future of work. And today it's going to be about authenticity and authentic leadership. I'm Mette Johansson. I'm the founder and chair of KeyNote. KeyNote is a directory of women speakers. We're on a mission to bring more diversity to speaking stages around the world. Because have you been to some of those conferences where it is very heavily male dominated? We want to change that. We want to have women equally voicing out their expertise and inspire audiences. Apart from KeyNote, I also run a training consultancy where we transform managers into leaders, and we work a lot in the area of diversity and inclusion. Of course, my favorite KeyNote speech is about the topic of authenticity and authentic leadership. With me today, I have Nicole Heimann, and Nicole is the co-CEO of Heimann, Cvetkovic and Partners. She's also an award-winning executive coach and advisor. Nicole, you are an expert on authenticity.
I'm delighted to be here, Mette. I'm so excited about her.
Absolutely. Yes. Now, authenticity. I speak a lot about authenticity. You speak a lot about authenticity. The first thing that I know that we need to clarify when we talk about authenticity and authentic leadership is, what is authenticity? Being you, being genuine, what part of you? Clarify this a little bit for us, please, Nicole.
I love this, Mette, because authenticity is a concept that is often so misunderstood. So maybe let's start with what it is not. So when people say, oh, I'm impulsive, I'm emotional, that's just me, and people need to take me for who I am, that's not what I understand as authentic. That is unconscious behavior. So authenticity is actually a dynamic process of constantly striving to become a better version of who we are. So it takes a lot of awareness, reflection, new actions, new reflections in the process. So a dynamic process.
A dynamic process. That's interesting. So describe that a little bit more. What is dynamic about it? What's the process, and between who?
Yeah, so it's really with ourselves first. And the dynamic part is the reflection part. So the ability and the willingness, the openness to reflect on our own actions, the impact we have, to take responsibility for that impact and decide on new actions if our previous actions weren't the ones that reflect who we want to be. So I think we all know the Viktor Frankl, who said between reaction and stimulus, there is a space. And this space is really the point of being in touch with ourselves. If we are able to observe our actions and take the space to reflect on them and make the choice to make new actions, that is where we are in touch with our authenticity, with our consciousness, with who we are, with that observing part. And that is dynamic. That is not something that just is.
When you mention being in touch with yourself, and you just sound so much like you are completely in touch with yourself, completely zen. It's, I believe very much in authenticity as well. But if we have this energy between us, it's quite interesting. I have to hold myself back to not be more bubbly and energetic and what have you, because that is what I feel is my authentic self. And you're just this complete zen. Any comments on that, Nicole?
Well, I love that, Mette, because I think often we get a question, who is your inspiration? Like, who do you want to be? But I believe we really have to know our essence, our core. And for me, it is indeed, I'm at my best when I'm in touch with this calmness inside. And you are at your best. You have a whole different energy that is bubbly and more dynamic. And you are at your best when you are in touch with that. So feel free to let it loose. And I don't believe there is one leader type that can be successful. I think the success really comes from being in touch with who we are, embracing ourselves fully and knowing where we are at our best.
Yeah. One thing that I very often also get with authenticity is about that people have an urge to define themselves beyond their work. When they are introducing themselves at work, especially women will often say, I'm the director of finance and I'm a mother of two. And they feel that they need to bring their whole selves to work because that's what we're hearing. And that's so important with diversity and inclusion. And I don't agree with that at all. I don't think that you need to say, I'm a mother of two when you're introducing yourself. Now, it's not really fair because if a man does it, he immediately is, he's a good family man and also thinking about his kids. When a woman says it, it's often, she's more of a mother than a finance director. So it's a little bit about the impact that it gives. It's, of course, not necessarily fair because men and women, when they say the same thing, I'm a parent, it's a different reaction from the audience. I still believe that it has nothing to do with authenticity because it is just one of the roles. And when you are introducing yourself, say at a board meeting of, hello, I'm going to share the annual results with you today. I'm the finance director. What relevance does it have that you are a mother of two? What's your opinion on that, Nicole?
Yeah. I fully agree with you on that, Mette. I think you are very right. We still have a lot of biases to deal with in this world. And they are different for men and women, and that's part of the reality we have to navigate. So we have different roles, and in those roles we will use different energies too, and different parts of who we are. And I think the concept of bringing our all in everything we do can be very exhausting. It's worthwhile to also reflect on what parts of me are needed here right now in this moment.
Absolutely. Yeah. I usually also bring in the example of that, I also like my glass of Chardonnay. I'm a wine lover. And if I introduce myself in a meeting saying I'm the finance director and a mother of two and I love Chardonnay, I mean, that's an authentic part of me, but is it relevant in that situation? No. So why should I mention it? So that is, I believe, one of the big misperceptions around authenticity. I agree in that you should be allowed to bring your whole self to work, show up as who you are, but not necessarily with the luggage of all your different roles. We are different in different situations. That is simply, we're playing different roles in situations. And I can see you nodding. So you also agree that this is not being inauthentic?
I so agree. And I believe that part of this has also been stimulated by the whole concept of vulnerability that is very much talked about these days. And it's also often misunderstood because vulnerability doesn't mean full disclosure. It means we have to know when to be vulnerable, in which context. And then the information we share has to be relevant and contain a learning or something valuable for the audience that is listening. But it doesn't mean I have to go on a course of full disclosure. That is not relevant for the context.
Absolutely. There's a good example with the leader who is in a crisis situation and wants to be vulnerable and say, I don't know how we're going to get out of this. I'm scared. When in fact, what the team needs at that point of time is a strong leader. At that point, showing vulnerability of, I don't know what to do, is not what your team needs. So that's a wrong kind of vulnerability. There it is about pulling yourself together and being there as a leader for your team because that's what the team needs. Is that inauthentic, Nicole?
No, I think that is taking responsibility for the role we said yes to. And then it's asking ourselves what is needed from me right now in this moment? How do I have to show up to have the impact on the team that I need to have to lead them through this crisis? It's an interesting subject, Mette, because I talk a lot as well with my clients about managing your emotional state. And this is really part of it. And this is also part of being authentic we have the choice in any moment to decide where we lead from. If we are full of worry, for example, that's okay to be honest with that ourselves. If we are going to show that to the team in times of crisis, it doesn't help. This is not leadership. So in that moment, we want to shift our energy and maybe connect to a state of appreciation and gratitude to manage ourselves into a more positive state, because we can only be in one emotional state at a time.
Very wise words.
We have choice. So, and this is authenticity, because here we reflect on who do I want to be as a leader? What is the impact I want to have? And authenticity is not, this is what it is and take me the way I am and deal with it because that's me. That is not the process of authenticity. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Nicole. Now that we have clarified what authenticity and authentic leadership is and is not perhaps as well, why should we care about authenticity? Why, to anybody who is a leader out there, who's in doubt, should I show up as my authentic self or not? Why should they even care about this?
I think there are many, many reasons, but one of the most important ones, in my opinion, is growth. If we don't grow and evolve, then nothing happens. And if we observe, some people are very resistant to growth. And most of the time, these people are also spending a lot of time in frustration. And there are also research studies that show that growth, inner growth, is directly related to our subjective experience of happiness. So I believe that our whole life, and if we look around in nature, everything is always about growth and change. And it's only by investing in ourselves and in our continuous inner growth that we can keep up with all the changes around us. Because the more we are connected to ourselves, the more chaos there can be in the outside, but we'll still be connected to ourselves, and each moment be in choice where to take it next.
If I'm going to be the devil's advocate here and say, well, there's many ways I can grow. Why should I focus on growing as an authentic leader? I can grow in many different ways. Why should somebody choose authenticity and authentic leadership as their path to grow?
Well, there are many ways. If the other ways I can think of are more like increasing my knowledge or learning skills. But what authenticity really brings you is, it brings you in touch with deep inner wisdom. It brings you in touch with the essence, the energy of creativity that flows. And it connects you with deep trust in yourself, in life, in that whatever happens for us and never again. So I think this access to deep wisdom, creativity, and trust are resources that we can access. And we cannot learn them anywhere. We cannot go to a school and learn wisdom or trust or creativity. These are resources that everyone has inside of us. And the more authentic we become, the bigger and the easier the access to those resources become. So if that's not a good reason, I think every leader would want to be in touch with inner wisdom, trust, and creativity.
Absolutely, absolutely. Very inspirational. Thank you. You work a lot around leadership alliances, right? Can you share a little bit more what that is about?
Yes. So working on our own authentic self is one thing, but working on our authentic relationships with each other is another game. And it's only what we call leadership alliances is authentic, intentional, and committed relationships at the top of organizations. Because if we have these at the top of the organizations, it is what will be reflected down in the culture of the organizations. If there are politics at the top, we will have politics in the whole organization. Because people look up, they copy what they see, and they do what their leaders do. So Leadership Alliances is all about authentic relationships, and because authenticity comes with reflection and a conscious process, we put intention and commitment in those relationships, in the way that we work together. And by doing that, the quality of the executive team becomes one of realness, being real with each other, being able to work together for the sake of something bigger than ourselves.
It sounds very much in sync with what, in general, companies today are focused more on purpose. It's more about the people and the planets, the purpose, rather than simply the profits that we had in the past. As late as 2019, the Business Roundtable in the US decided that, okay, we're not going to focus only on shareholders anymore. We're going to open it up to say that companies are about focusing on stakeholders, different stakeholders, employees, environment, and of course also the shareholders. So it goes with this whole philosophy, doesn't it? That we are much more conscious about that there's other things than profit that we need to be working towards in a company. Can you give an example of some leaders that you have worked with at the top, where working with them on their authenticity and their leadership alliances made a difference for the company?
Yes, I'm thinking of one CEO where it was really a beautiful process. We first started working on his own authenticity, and as we were integrating and as he was transforming, he started to see exactly those aspects in his organization that we had transformed. And this realization was an enormous, beautiful moment, because he realized it in the moment that he was telling me, okay, we've done enough work here. We need to focus more on the organization, because this is what I see. And I said, wow, do you remember where we started 6 months ago? It was exactly this. And the power a CEO has on the whole organization is so underestimated, because the highest level of consciousness that he has is at the same time the plafond for the organization to grow. So this coaching process has led to more work with the executive team and to innovations, because the aspect of sustainability in the environment became much bigger, and they weren't so focused on that up till then. And it became a huge part of the company's strategy. So the whole transformation of the CEO's authenticity, the connection to purpose, where he discovered how important environment was to him, how important sustainability was to him, then led to the process of working together with the team on this. And his whole purpose of sustainability really went into the strategic course this company is taking in terms of innovation. And I mean, I think this is beautiful and so powerful. And I also believe, Mette, that there is no shortcut. There is no shortcut from doing the authentic work. I don't see other ways of how people can get there, because if we are not connected on the inside and we have disconnected from parts of ourselves unconsciously for whatever reasons, it impacts the way we see the world. We don't see the connections outside. And the more integrated and connected we become, the more connected we also see the world. And this has a direct impact on the decisions we take and the actions we take. So in my opinion, every CEO should have a coach and do authentic work, because it accelerates the process of growth, not only for the CEO himself, but for the whole company.
That's a very interesting aspect, because my next question was going to be, isn't there sometimes a little bit of a contradiction between focusing too much on yourself, the inward looking and building alliances, instead of focusing on your core business and going for the profit? Is there a contradiction there?
No, because it is all connected. So the focus on self, I believe, is a different one when we do it together with a coach or when we do it alone. So self-reflection by oneself, I'm not sure that is a high qualitative self-reflection, because none of us, and I think I can speak for both of us, also we as coaches, we cannot see our own blind spots. We need each other to help us see our blind spots. This focus on our inner growth is often connected to purpose, to our leadership, to relationships with people that we have. So it is not just ourselves, it is looking at how can I become better in relationship with others for the sake of something bigger than myself.
I absolutely agree with you, Nicole. Of course, also the self-awareness that we as leaders have will make us more emotional intelligence. When we understand ourselves better, it's also easier to understand other people better. When we understand other people better, it's easier to understand how do we interrelate. So yes, I absolutely agree with you that looking at yourself, looking at inward, understanding yourself better is a way to grow as a leader. So I fully agree with you there. Now, you also talk a lot about board influence, right? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, this is, thanks for mentioning that, Mette, because board leadership is totally underestimated. So if we look at the CEO and the executive team, it's one team organism. It's we can capture it, but the CEO also has to influence the board. Is extremely important because they influence all strategic decisions. Now, there are very little boards that do some inner work, that reflect on their leadership. And it's not an easy one, because you have a group of individuals that comes together, that forms the board. And for instance, in France, it is obligatory that also boards do 360s, but it is the only country I know of where that is an obligation. And yeah, because the development of authenticity is directly related to elevating consciousness, which, as we elevate consciousness, we see the world in a different way, can make decisions with a higher awareness, a higher integrity, a bigger responsibility. I would invite all board members to really also engage on a path of authenticity together, because if we want to create a better world, a more sustainable world, corporations have a large influence, and we need everyone at the top to be involved.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. One thing that you haven't touched very much upon, and maybe I'll briefly mention it, is core to what I do also as part of being authentic and authentic leadership. And why should you care? When we find our authentic selves, when we define what are the core values that are absolutely uncompromisable for us, right? That they're just so fundamentally important to us in our personal lives, in our professional lives. Then often our purpose springs from it. And when we know our purpose, our passion gets ignited. And when we have passion, we have so much energy to do extraordinary things. Plus, when we are living our purpose, our passion, we become inspirational. When we are inspired, we also can inspire others, at least if we dare to embrace all of this. And that is one thing when I work with leaders, often I want them to embrace the inspiration that they have and also communicate it, live it on a daily basis. I used to work in corporate communications, and there was often we had to roll out some message that was sent from the top, right? Roll out the new strategy or roll out the new, whatever it was, vision. And that is just not how communications is rolled out. That's not how you engage people. That's not how you inspire others. It's about talking about what you believe in, what you find is important, and what we can do with this company together. And when you dare to communicate that and live that on a daily basis, being inspirational, that's when you create followers. So that is one area that I also believe would be extremely important, whether it's on the board level or whether it's in with the top leadership. That is one area that I would like to stress here as well. What I think is interesting about this is there's not really one definition of this is authentic leadership and this is what you must do. And do you agree with that? Sometimes it's a bit frustrating that there's not one definition. What do you think? What are your thoughts about this, Nicole?
I agree. I think there are different paths. And what I discovered over the years is, so one day somebody asked me, how do you coach somebody into their authentic leadership? And I said, well, I can't really answer this. So I started to think, like, what do I really do? And I started taking notes of everything that comes together in a coaching process for me. And that's how I discovered these 7 dimensions of leadership, that it's really a process of integrating. So these 7 dimensions are physical dimension, being reconnected back to the body, feeling ourselves, also becoming aware when we have tensions, that we can relax again using the body, also living in a healthy body is part of that. Then, of course, the field you mentioned, emotional intelligence, a huge field. Values are, for me, one of the biggest and most important elements in the emotional intelligence field. Then heart intelligence. Our heart has neurons and it has intelligence, and we can feel into it. And integrating this as well in our decisions is important, because it will give us a different kind of information than the mind or the body will do. Then pragmatic intelligence, this is what most leaders are really good at, rollouts and strategic plans and also vision. Communication intelligence, the way we communicate, how we communicate, the impact we have, our attitude in communication. And then we have neuroscience intelligence, understanding how the brain works in stress when we are online and offline, or knowing what we need to guarantee our brain neuroplasticity. And the whole field of neuroscience is super inspirational because it gives us a lot of research to help clients understand what is really happening, that is really valuable in the process. And then the consciousness intelligence. So that is the invitation to believe that there might be something bigger than ourselves. And to explore also this field, to explore our own consciousness through observing, starting to activate an inner observer into ourselves. So, yeah, these 7 dimensions are what I actively work with in the coaching process. And it is different for everyone. So with some people, the door of values is the biggest one that opens up. For others, it's another door where you start working, because once you start working in one dimension, it impacts the whole. And and we all have different entrance doors. For some, it is becoming aware of the body again, that this is much more than a transport means for our head.
Fantastic.
So, so yes, there are different paths, and I think that is also what is needed, because we are all on different journeys.
Yeah, absolutely. So is there one more thing before we leave that you would like our listeners, our viewers to know before we part today?
Well, I hope our conversation has inspired you. And if there's something that I hope you will take to heart, it is invest in yourself. This path of development in authenticity is a never-ending journey. And in that respect, I think I would like to end with, we are like onions. We peel away one layer and the next one is waiting.
Absolutely.
Beautiful.
And it takes some tears in the process as well, doesn't it?
That's why it's onions.
Oh, Thank you so much, Nicole. With us today is Nicole Heimann. This is Mette Johansson, your host. This has been KeyNote Expert Voices. I hope you will listen in to also our next episodes of our podcast. Subscribe to all our media channels. Keep abreast of what we're doing. Support us so that you can also support more women being out there on stages as thought leaders and inspirational, expert, awesome women to simply inspire others. Thank you very much. This is Mette Johansson and Nicole Heimann.